I don't know what I did different with my bangs today, but I feel like they're just sitting really well, and I'm worried that I'll never be able to recreate this look ever again. It has been a while since I've uploaded a video. I have been trying to record videos, and every time that I look at the video, I'm like, ugh, I hate it. In my head, there's just like this imaginary barrier that is stopping me from creating any new video. That barrier in my mind is telling me I need to just recap any of the books that I have read, like either in the month, in the quarter, or anything like that. But I feel like I've read too much so far, and it's been like too much time in this year for me to not kind of go over every book that I have read. I have a list here of 23 books that I have read so far this year, and so I thought I would just go through and quickly recap them, okay? First of all, let's start with January and all the books that I read in January. First book that I finished on New Year's Day, it was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I will say the book was alright. I gave the book 3 stars, but then I ended up watching the movie a couple of days later, and I loved the movie. Hello. I think if you've seen Hamnet, I think you would agree that it is a phenomenal movie. I think for me, I like the movie a whole lot more because it basically made the timeline a whole lot more linear, whereas in the book, a lot of the things that we see are kind of like cutting back and forth between like kind of present time. We're cutting around basically, which is very similar to how like real life memory works and everything like that. And I understand that, but seeing it in the movie and having it make a whole lot more sense in the movie, I just liked it a whole lot more. The next book that I read was Breast and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. This is the first Kawakami book that I have read, and it's about a woman who is deciding to have babies by herself, and it's more so about, I guess, like Japanese society. I didn't truly relate to like the feminist angle of the book. I really enjoyed the character who was completely against single motherhood, but it's not because she's an anti-feminist, it's because she's against all motherhood, and she feels that like it's an act of violence to bring a child into this world. And I'm like, slay. You're kind of crazy, but okay, slay. The next book I read was I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. I enjoyed this book. It wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. It's a book about, I think, 30-ish women who were trapped in a bunker for a whole bunch of years. And the main character that we are following the thoughts of has only ever known this bunker. She was taken as a child and put in this bunker along with these other women, and she has never known realistically like the outside world or life before it, compared to the other women who were in this bunker who did know life before the bunker, who had a full life outside of the bunker. I came to the book thinking that it was going to be, I guess, sci-fi dystopian. We would find out why they are in the bunker or something like that. But instead, it's more of, I guess, an internal kind of look at like what it means to be human. I found it very interesting still. Like, unfortunately, you don't get any answers about why they're in the bunker, but that's not really the point of the book itself. You're more so looking at what it means to be a person, what it means to be a person when you have no, I guess, external kind of feedback, no normal kind of societal feedback to say what you are or who you are. Like, it was very interesting. I enjoyed it quite a lot, even though it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. The next book that I read was a non-fiction. It's called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Doughty. Caitlin Doughty runs a YouTube channel here. It's called Ask a Mortician, where she makes videos about bizarre deaths, dead bodies, stuff like that, like kind of macabre stuff. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, I believe it was her first book, and I think it was released before she created her YouTube channel, and I think she only had a blog at that point, because she does talk about having the blog in the book itself. But it's basically just her recounting the things that she learned at her first job at the first crematorium funeral home that she worked at. And I thought it was really interesting because she talks a lot about like different death practices from different religions and how, I guess, you kind of learn to approach grieving families and observing how grieving families, you know, treat their dead loved ones. And also, I guess, more of like a thought of how modern Western society, at least, we are very detached from the death process. Like, I find the fact that death is like completely inevitable really fascinating to me, and I find it also fascinating when people are so like averse and like weird to talk about it, but I love it. The next book I read was Family Experiment by John Mars. This This was the first John Mars book that I had ever read. Unfortunately, it's not the last John Mars that I read, but I'm not going to be reading any more. This book is rated 4 stars on Goodreads, and it was a nominee for the reader's favorite science fiction book in 2024. Premise of the book is like so convoluted. Let me just read this little blurb for the book from Goodreads, because otherwise I'm going to butcher it. Some families are virtually perfect. The world's population is soaring, creating overcrowded cities and an economic crisis. And in the UK, the breaking point has arrived. A growing number of people can no longer afford to start families, let alone raise them. But for those desperate to experience parenthood, there is an alternative. For a monthly subscription fee, clients can create a virtual child from scratch, who they can access via the metaverse and a VR headset. To launch this new initiative, the company behind Virtual Children has created a reality TV show called The Substitute. It will follow 10 couples as they raise... Wait, this is in the UK. It will follow 10 couples as they raise a virtual child from birth to the age of 18, but a condensed into 9-month time frame. The prize? The right to keep their virtual child or risk it all for the chance of a real baby. Set in the same universe as John Mars' best-selling novel, The One and the Marriage Act, the family experiment is a dark and twisted thriller about the ultimate Tamagotchi, a virtual baby. This book is stupid and I hated it. The synopsis says that we are living in like this terrible world where everything is like super expensive and people can't afford to have babies or anything like that. But I feel as if the actual book itself, it didn't show us that poverty that is in the world. So it doesn't make any sense why anyone would like opt into having a baby via these means. The only other piece of media that I have experienced like a world where people are living in VR because the outside world is like terrible and awful is Ready Player One. I read that book when I was a teenager, and from what I remember in the movies at least, they had portrayed that poverty that everyone is living in by showing that people are like living in these stacks, which are just apartments that are made out of shipping containers. In that kind of world, I can understand why people would opt in to make a metaverse baby and live in the metaverse that ways. But in the family experiment, I feel as if there is no world building to actually show why anyone would choose to have a baby in this sort of means, especially if it's going to be something that's like televised to a live TV audience for the opportunity to have an IRL baby or a virtual baby. As a side note, because I had such a bad experience with the family experiment, I decided to read The Marriage Act by John Mars, which is another book that's supposed to be in this same sort of universe, just to see whether or not it's my fault for not having read his other books and that's why the world felt flat and undeveloped. The Marriage Act, I had to DNF that book at like 25% in. People like choose to get married because I guess when you are married, you get, I guess, more benefit as a married couple rather than as a single person. So I believe you were supposed to be able to get like better education opportunities for your children. I think there was also better opportunity for like housing, like in better schooling districts if you're a married couple, also better healthcare opportunities. And so when you are married, you can then opt in to be like a perfect marriage or some shit like that, where you're basically inviting in like a smart home monitoring device or something like that that'll go into your home and is constantly recording so that it's going to pick up on your tone of voice when you're talking to your partner, and it's going to pick up on what you're saying to your partner and then give you suggestions on how to improve your relationship. Also, if you're then having issues within your relationship, it'll send out like a government counselor kind of thing to like monitor you directly or some shit. I feel like that concept itself, it's not that bad, but I do feel as if it would be like the first idea that is brought to the writing room for Black Mirror. The reason why I chose to DNF it, I was like rolling my eyes all the fucking time. Okay, I gave this book 2 strikes and I was out. The first strike was when this family is sitting around the TV watching like a news broadcast and they're talking about like this influencer who had went down the slide to the sewer. As the family are like sitting around the TV, one of the kids makes like a distasteful joke about it, and the mum character was like, "What? Why would you say that? I thought you learned not to do that at woke studies in school." I don't know. I just found that really cringe. And so that was the first strike. The second strike was when a character is advocating that all married couples should opt in to have 24/7 monitoring from these smart home devices in their home. And the character is like going on this new show to have a debate with like some other guy who's like obviously against it for the privacy reasons. This character says something along the lines of, well, I'm not hiding anything, and that's why I'm going to use the hashtag I will do better. Will you? And I encourage everyone else to use that hashtag too. And then later on, she is like checking her phone, and the hashtag I will do better. Will you? Is trending. Hey, this book was released in 2023. First of all, I don't really think that we use hashtags like that anymore. We haven't used hashtags like that for a good couple of years. And this is supposed to be in the future. Second of all, that's the worst hashtag I've ever seen. Why is anyone using it? Anyway, that was the second strike for the Marriage Act. I put it down. It's the only sort of like DNF that I'm proudly going to be like, I DNF'd it for a reason. Okay, moving on from my John Mars rant, let me speed through these. The next I read was I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue. This is about a woman at work who is hashtags like no friends, hashtag no co-workers, hashtag just here to do her job, not make any friends, just do it. And she's been inadvertently bullying her co-worker. Like she'll send an email that'll say like, yeah, sure, I can run that report for you. And then underneath that, she'll write out something really mean, but then make the text white so that whenever they're reading the email, they're not going to see that text in white. And she gets called into a meeting with her boss, and it happens to be her birthday, and she's like, guys, they're gonna wish me happy birthday. Thank God, they're gonna wish me happy birthday. But they're not there to wish her a happy birthday. They are there to put her on a pit. IT and HR are basically there to put this monitoring software on her computer so that they are able to see like exactly what she's doing. But there's some sort of error, and she has access to view everyone else in her team's computer. So she's able to see the emails that her coworkers are getting, the Teams messages that her coworkers are getting and shit like that. She's able to access like their files. It was like a little bit of a feel-good story because it makes you realize like, damn, everyone else is like living their own life and you never know what someone else's struggle is. It didn't really feel realistic just because if I were to imagine my work computer blowing up with not just the Teams messages that I'm getting, but then the Teams messages that my other co-workers just within my team are sending and receiving to like each other or to other people, I think my brain would implode, and I think I would immediately go to IT and be like, fix it. I would own up to it straight away. Moving on to the books that I read in February. I read a non-fiction book. I read A Very Short History of the Israel-Palestine Conflict by Elaine Pape. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name. I'm so sorry. This book does what it says on the tin. It's around like 140 pages. I found it very interesting because I would say I'm very ignorant on like a lot of geopolitical history, not just in that region, but like all throughout the world. I would really recommend this book. I found it very helpful for me. The next book I read was Shred Sisters by Betsy Lerner. I didn't really love this book. This is a book about two sisters. We are following Ollie and Amy, but all of it is being narrated by Amy, and Amy is just like a goody two shoes who doesn't really like her sister, who's a bit of like a loose cannon, and I guess it's about like their family dynamics and everything like that. I didn't really care for it. I found that Amy was just like a super annoying character. I can't even tell you like the actual events of this book. There's not really much to say about this book. I've just found it very boring. The next book I read though was Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. It's basically following a family living in Ireland while the government kind of falls into like this kind of fascist rule. This was a very interesting book to read at the time when a lot of stuff was happening in Minnesota, USA, with ICE agents and everything like that. I really like this book and I really would recommend it. The next book I read was Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green, another non-fiction book. Again, I thought it was really good. I thought he would be talking about a lot more things being tuberculosis, but I think it's more of a, I guess, a look at global health and also like, I guess, global health politics and stuff like that. Like kind of crazy to think how like something like tuberculosis could be eradicated if one of those billionaires just stopped trying to hoard wealth and just, you know, maybe took action. Like when you start thinking about the cost of like medication and stuff like that, how it's like technically so cheap to create it. It makes me really angry. I thought it was a really good book. I thought it was really interesting. The next book I read was The Hollow Man by John Dickson Carr, I believe. I read this book because it was featured in the new Knives Out movie, The Wake Up Dead Man, when Mila Kunis is coming in and being like, I solved it because I read this book. Now, I really like that movie, so when I read that book, I was expecting like maybe there would be like some parallels there, but there weren't any parallels there. It's the first kind of like old traditional kind of mystery novels that I've ever read. I feel like I'm not really super familiar with their format. The Hollow Man was also another book that was mentioned in the next book I read, which was a reread, Fair Play by Louise Hegarty. I reread this. I made a whole video about it. I don't like this book. I thought it was really bad. I thought it was bad the first time I read it. It's bad the second time I read it. If you're interested in learning why I think it's so bad, you can watch the video that I made. Thank y'all. And then the final book that I read in February was Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein. This was like another thing that I thought maybe it would be similar to the movie, but it was like nothing like the movie. Okay, moving on now to March. The books that I read in March, starting off, Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. This was the first Alice Feeney book that I've ever read. I am familiar with her other work, just because I like to watch videos of people recap, so I know the story of like Scissor Paper Rock and My Husband's Wife. I think that's like the latest one. If I were to look at the cover for My Husband's Wife and Beautiful Ugly, they look exactly the same. So I saw the cover for My Husband's Wife and I was like, oh, that was the one that I just read. No, it wasn't. They're completely different. Beautiful Ugly, it's about a man who is an author. His book is being listed on New York Times like bestseller or something like that, and he calls his wife to tell her the good news. The phone call like cuts out. She goes missing. Flash forward to like a year later, she's still missing, but he now has writer's block. And his agent says, hey, I have this writing cabin on this like remote island. Do you want to go to it? And so he's like, yeah, sure. He goes to the island and there is like only women on the island and stuff like that. Find out more about like what happened to his wife. Now, the reveal of this book does not make sense when you look back at every other piece of information that we've learned. Everything else that we have been told essentially becomes like a lie. And I don't like a narrator who like straight up lies to me. If a narrator is able to like, I guess, lie by omission kind of thing, if they're able to kind of like obscure it and like just maybe not tell me something, I'm fine with that. But this narrator straight up lies. And so when we get the reveal, it's like, okay, that's the complete opposite to what you had said. So like reading that, I'm like, okay, Alice Feeney thinks that I'm stupid. Alice Feeney thinks that her reader base are stupid. Okay, after that, I then read Strange Pictures by Uketsu. I didn't love this one. I first read Strange Houses last year, and I believe that there is also Strange Buildings that came out this year. I think I'm over the gimmick of there being like weird graphics in these books. I don't love like the writing style, and I also feel like, I don't know if this analogy is going to make sense, but the writing style of like Strange Pictures and Strange Houses feels a lot like those videos of like ghost sightings from way back when, where it would show the video, did you see it? And then it will show the video again at 2 times speed and show it again at 3 times speed and show it again frame by frame, and if you didn't catch it, they'll do frame by frame again, but with a red circle around the apparition that you're supposed to be seeing. That kind of feels like the writing style of these books by Uketsu, because you keep being told, but what about this? Like, don't piss me off. Don't piss me off. Okay, I haven't mentioned any of the star ratings for any of these books, but I will say that in March, I did get my first 5-star book. And that book was How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. I think maybe it's described as like a collection of short stories, but basically like every chapter can be seen as like a short story, but all of them are like interconnected. So I just kind of read it kind of like a novel. All of like the little stories are basically revolving around this one same incident where these scientists have gone up to like Siberia and they excavate this old mummified body of like a child. And unfortunately, in that ancient mummified body, in that ancient ice that's melting and spreading all throughout the world, there was like this really deadly ancient virus. Basically like a pandemic ensues, and so each chapter is about like different aspects of life during, after, within like this pandemic of this really ancient disease that is primarily targeting children and like elderly people. So good. I really feel as if this could be something that's really well like adapted into like a TV show or something like that, where every chapter can basically be like its own episode. Please. And then the final book that I read in March was The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is an epistolary novel, I believe it's called, where it is told through the perspective of all of these letters that our main character is sending, the letters that she's receiving. It also includes like emails, basically like any of the correspondence that she is receiving. We are reading and learning about her life through that. This book was like fine. It wasn't my favorite. It kind of feels like a book that like maybe older people would like. It didn't really feel like my kind of vibe, but I saw good things about it and I was influenced, so I bought it and I read it and I didn't love it. I feel like one of the weirdest things is that our main character sends an email to like customer service and is like getting on a personal level with the customer service rep. First of all, if that was me and I was on that receiving end of that customer service email, I would never entertain this old woman, okay? Second of all, also our main character is like writing letters to her favorite authors. I believe she writes a letter to Joan Didion, and I think she also writes a letter to Murakami. I could be making that up. I'll need to double check to see who she actually writes the letter to. I'll need to double check to see if like Virginia Evans actually is friends or was friends with Joan Didion, because it kind of feels weird to be writing a book and be like, yeah, and Joan Didion is actually like my best friend and she writes to me all the time, and Joan Didion actually really likes my writing as well. Yeah, she said that to me. She said that to me in a letter. Like, it kind of feels like the kind of lies that you would make as a child, but like, that's just me. That's just me being like a hater. I didn't love this book. I didn't love it. It wasn't my vibe. Moving on to the books that I then read in April. I read Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. This is about a family who are living on this remote island between like Tasmania, Australia and Antarctica. Their whole purpose on this island is to protect, basically, or be like the stewards of this seed bank for like thousands and thousands of seeds. And one day this random woman floats up on shore and it's kind of like, well, why is she here? What is she doing here? What was her purpose? What did she want from us? Kind of thing. I thought the book was fine. It didn't have quite as much of a punch as I thought it was going to. A lot of people said great things about it. Next, I read All Her Fault by Andrea Mara. This is a book that was like adapted into a show, I believe, with Sarah Snook. And it is about a child that goes missing from these kind of like well-off families. I think the book was like pretty decent. The story behind it as well, it was like a pretty decent story. Unfortunately, like before reading the book, I did watch like part 17 of the TV show uploaded to TikTok, which is the number one way to watch TV. So I knew like the ending, I knew the twist, but it was still interesting to like read the book and to get to that point and be like, oh, okay, cool. The next book I read in April was also another nonfiction. I read Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. It's about Naomi Klein, who is like an author, and she talks about how for a lot of her career she has been mistaken or confused with another author, academic woman named Naomi Wolf. And basically how like when COVID-19 happened, Naomi Wolf kind of went down the alt-right pipeline and started peddling conspiracy theories around COVID, around masks, around like everything within that kind of grifty right-wing pipeline, and how Naomi Klein, I guess, was kind of seeing her evil twin out there. It is like a kind of like a look at that right-wing pipeline through the lens of having an evil twin out there who was partaking and peddling nonsense. And you know what? I sit here and say it's right-wing nonsense, but Naomi Klein brings up a good point where it's like, we will say that they are like the nonsense ones, whereas on their side, they are looking at us saying that we are the nonsense ones. And it's like, really interesting perspective. Why can't we all just get along? Moving on now to the books that I read in May. I read Yesteryear by Caro Claire Berg. I found that the story was really interesting and I really liked it. Look, this book is getting a lot of buzz. People have opinions about it. People like, people don't like. I liked it. This is basically a book about a Christian tradwife influencer who is living on Yesteryear ranch, Yesteryear farm. And one day she wakes up and it's like the 1800s and there's no electricity. She doesn't have Instagram anymore. She is living like it is the 1800s and she is a tradwife again. And it's like, whoa, is this real? Is this psychosis? Like, what's happening? I feel like Anyone who says, oh, I didn't like this book because I didn't like the main character, I thought she was mean. Shut up. I know that the main character is a bad person. The author knows that the main character is a bad person. The author doesn't want you to side with her. I really liked it. Look, I didn't love the ending, but at the same time, I don't even know where it could have gone aside from like the ending that it gave us. So I don't know how to improve on it. So I'm going to accept it for how it is. Following on from main characters who are completely insufferable, the next book I read was Best Offer Wins by Marissa Cascino. This is a book about a married couple who are trying to buy a home in Washington, D.C., or like in that kind of area. They're basically just trying to find a house within that kind of circle. But unfortunately, it is so competitive in that area and they're stressing out. Our main character is basically like desperate to buy a house. She has spent like 18 months trying to put in all of these offers on all of these houses that are coming up in the area. And all of the time she's just basically like shut down. Our main character basically hears a rumor from her realtor's sister's friend from a yoga class that friend from the yoga class is going to be putting their house on offer in the next coming months because their husband has taken a role in England and they're going to have to move and sell their home. Our main character then becomes like obsessed with the house and obsessed with trying to befriend them in order to be able to get into that home. And the best part is that the homeowners find out what she's trying to do like a quarter of the way into the book and there's still 3/4 left to go. What is she going to do? She is still obsessed and single-minded on that one house and making sure that she and her husband are going to be the ones who buy their way into that house. It was a really great book and our main character, I hated her. Everything she was doing, I was like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that, Margot? No. Then finally, the last book that I read to get me caught up, I read Fruit Fly by Josh Silver. Another book with another insufferable, annoying main female character, and I loved her so much. We have two main characters. We have Mallory and Leo. Mallory is like an author who had a successful young adult novel a couple of years ago, but ever since she's been kind of stuck, and again, she has writer's block, and she wants to be inspired to write like a new adult novel that will change her life, basically. This book is like a little bit about the publishing industry, I guess, with our main character, Mallory. She decides that the next kind of trending topic for adult fiction is stuff that's like dark, gritty, and gay. And so she wants to write a gay novel, except she's a straight woman in a married relationship with a man. How would she know how to write gay? Our main character is like, oh, I've been out and gay guys have said, yes, mama, slay queen. I think that that's how gay people communicate with each other. She then is like, oh, well, how do I find more gay people so I can do more research? Oh, I know. I'll download Grindr and use photos of my husband so that I can talk to men. So she's messaging like a bunch of dudes at 3 a.m. One of these guys invites her over for a tea party and she's like, oh, a tea party at 2 a.m. Okay, I'll bring vol-au-vents. She goes over there in her car. She's there with a picnic basket thinking, oh my God, they're going to think it's so funny when I show up on the doorstep. I'll say, guess what? I'm the one from Grindr. I just want to befriend you guys. I want to befriend you queens. Yes, queen slay. And imagine her surprise when she's about to get out of the car and she sees Leo, a young drug addict, trying to get into the party, and he's giving like a bag of drugs and he gets like beaten up by his drug dealer. And Mallory's like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. Maybe this isn't a tea party. She Googles it and turns out that a tea party is like underground slang for a meth-fueled orgy. And it's like, hey, girl, why wouldn't you Google that before you left the house? I had to give that backstory to say like why I love this book and I love this character. She ends up befriending Leo in order to try and do that research so that she can write her gay little book. And Leo is basically trying to scam her back by trying to get into her rich house so that he can steal from her. I thought it was a really great book. I obviously loved the cover of it. The cover, the colors, it looked gorgeous, and that's what drew me in, kind of like a fruit fly a little bit. But hey, amazing. Amazing, amazing book. Amazing, amazing book. Amazing, amazing women. Crunchy, crunchy bush. Okay, guys. We're at the end. Finally, hopefully I can edit this video and put it out there so that people can watch it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it all the way through, thank you so much for being here. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. And if not, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!